launching into the deep can mean so many things. I'm not a fisherman. I like to go fishing, but I'm not a fisherman. I feed the fish, which means I throw bait out and they eat it. And that's, for me, what I see Jesus doing in this passage. He's calling people out. So if you have your Bibles, open up to Luke 5, and we're going to look at verses 4 through 11. And I'll give you a minute to get there. So as I was preparing for this, I was looking at this passage of Scripture, and you may be very, very familiar with it. You may already know what it is. And we see here Jesus calling out to one of his disciples to bring him into the fold. In Luke 5, the heading of my Bible says the first disciples. Plain and simple. Calling to the first disciples. So we start in verse 4. It said, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon. Okay, so Jesus here is preaching from the shore. Jesus is preaching to the people, and he's talking to them, trying to help them to understand who he is. And he's on the Sea of Galilee. Jesus now is standing on the boat. He's standing on the boat with Simon Peter, who most of us know him as Peter the Apostle. So Jesus here is speaking to him. He says, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon Peter, now go out where it is deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish. Master, Simon replied, we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. But if you say so, I'll let the nets down again. And this time, their nets were so full of fish that they began to tear. A shout for help brought their partners in the other boat, and soon both boats were filled with fish and on the verge of sinking. When Simon Peter realized what happened, he fell on his knees before Jesus and said, "O Lord, please leave me. I'm such a sinful man." For he was awestruck by the number of fish that they had caught, as were the others with him. His partners, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, were also amazed. So Jesus responded to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on you'll be fishers of people," or a fisher of men. And as soon as they landed, they left everything and they followed Jesus. See, I love this passage of Scripture because we see here that Simon Peter, he's in trouble. Simon Peter, they've caught no fish all night, and Jesus is saying, go out farther and cast your nets. They already have heard Jesus speaking. They've understood who he is a little bit. They're like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, this guy's talking about some things of the heavenly world and realm that we don't understand, but okay, cool. So they go out. And Simon Peter reluctantly says, man, we've been working hard all night, God. We've been working hard all night. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like God calls us in deeper waters, even if we don't want to go. For us, and for my family, it's been constantly going deeper and deeper and relying on the Lord in spaces and places that we often don't want to go or that we feel like we shouldn't go. From our perspective, sometimes going deeper doesn't make sense. Maybe in your life you've been there and like, man, going into a deeper faith doesn't make sense for us. But God's calling comes in the ordinary. See, Jesus steps into Peter's boat after a long, frustrating night. Okay? We can see that. He steps into the boat after a long night. Jesus here is walking into this man who is probably tired, who's probably wore out, who's probably so fed up with everything in life that he's like, okay, yeah, use my boat, hurry up, get done so I can go home and take a nap. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've been up all night with your kids. Maybe you've been working, making lesson plans. Maybe whatever it is, you've been there to where it's been a long, frustrating night to where you're just saying, okay, this is it. And Jesus is asking you to do something. Maybe it's I've been up all night with my kids and then you're at work the next day and you're like, man, I just want to go home. I'm tired. There's nobody at the sawmill. Can I just go take a nap? Nobody's calling me. And then that one guy shows up that you know never stops talking, never shuts his mouth. That you're sitting there going, I'm going to get his whole life story all over again. Or maybe it's, you're in the classroom and you're tired of kids peeing and pooping their pants and you're like, can I just go home? I'm done. And then you get that one student who asks that question that you've already answered 14 times. Whatever it may be, God uses those times. Jesus uses those times. God uses everyday places for eternal purposes. See, what we can see here is that he's using what Peter's doing. The everyday purpose of being a fisherman for eternal purposes. And I love this last one, that God often shows up in the middle of our ordinary grind. And what that is are you available for God to use you in your daily life? God will use us when we are just going throughout life. When we are walking through life, you say, man, this is a grind. I'm tired. Every day, every night, working, slaving away. And how God just decided to use what Peter had, the boat. Now, I've talked about this before, but the acoustics, Jesus' divine, how he thinks, he knew that the lake would cause the acoustics to take the message farther. Jesus knew that standing on the boat would give him something farther, something greater. Point number 2 is that obedience precedes the miracle. Because you said so, all down the nets. Jesus says, hey, cast your nets to the other side. Cast your nets out again and watch what happens. This miracle that happens when Peter just says, okay, I'll obey. That song, I'll take you at your word. God, it's hard. But your word says if I'll do this, then you'll provide for me. It's hard. It doesn't make sense. Faith isn't always about understanding. It's about trusting God. A miracle can't happen without the obedience, and it has to happen through us being obedient to Him. Even when we don't understand it, even when it don't make sense, to be obedient to God. Going out into the deep means this, that we will go where He calls us to go. The song of, when the waves are coming at me and my faith may fail, and how Jesus is there, and I completely butchered it, and you're like, I don't know what song you're talking about. It's not my notes. So there we go. The title's not my notes. Some of you guys are like, yes, this is a Pastor Lynch's message. It's awesome. You'll never see what God can do if you stay in the shallow water. You'll never see what God can do if you stay in the shallow water. Imagine if Peter didn't push the boat out farther. If Jesus said, hey, push the boat out farther, and Peter was like, nah, bro. We good. We good here. How many of you guys, not Sanctified, the movie Just Go With It, where he tosses the kid into the water because he doesn't know how to swim, and they're like, this is how my grandpa told me to swim. Jumps in. Like, we don't learn how to swim unless we go deeper into the water, unless we have someone there walking with us. I remember teaching our boys to swim. Remember in our backyard in Wyoming, Michigan, holding Jackson's stomach. Okay, kick, push, swing your arms, let's go, and teach them how to swim. That's what Jesus is doing. He's saying, hey, I'm here. I won't let you drown. I may let you go under, and sometimes I might want you to stay under, but that's my human flesh. That's why when people ask me to baptize, I'm like, okay. If I don't like you, though, you're going to get an extra long hold. I'm kidding. Some of us need it. But Jesus is standing there walking alongside of us saying, hey, I'm not going to let you drown. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. But if we don't get out of the shallow water, we'll never grow. See, church, if we don't get out of the shallow water in our faith, we'll never grow deeper in Him. The New Testament tells us about milk and steak, or milk and food, and how when we feed our babies, it's milk because they don't have the teeth to digest it. But as they grow up, they can handle the steak, they can handle the beef, they can handle the chicken, they can handle that good meat. The same is true in our faith. As we grow in God, we can handle more. And God says, I'm not going to put more on you than what I know you can bear. But bearing it is in Him, allowing for Him to come alongside of us. Our faith has to take us out of the shallow water into the deep water so that Jesus can do the miracles when we obey, so that when we obey, we can understand. I don't know about you, but oftentimes in my life, I sit back and I go, okay, Jesus, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? See, verses 4 through 7 says, a shout for help brought their partners in the other boat. And soon both boats were filled with fish on the verge of sinking. We see here that they're sitting there and they're yelling out to the sons of Zebedee, who are, I love their name. Nickname is also, does anyone know? The sons of what? Thunder. Come on now. I'm like, if that can be my nickname, like, I imagine my family were huge Marvel, like Thor, like right? Like sounds of thunder, lightning, right? That's awesome. Powerful. And I think the sons of thunder became known as that because of the ground-shaking faith they have, but also because of the momentum that they would bring to the church, how powerful they were for the church. James and John, as they leave their dad, as Simon Peter leaves his parents to go and to follow Jesus, this obedience out of it, and how they're just astonished at what happens. Imagine with me that you're sitting there in this boat and you haven't caught anything all night, and you're hungry, you're tired, you're like, I'm sore, because it's not like they're sitting there with their fishing rod, right, just reeling it in. No, they're chucking nets out, man. They're hauling these things. I don't know how much they weigh, but, I imagine that they weren't light. 10, 20 pounds. Have you ever tried to take a 20-pound and just swing it out? After a while, it gets tiring. So they're sitting there casting these nets, throwing them off to the side. I imagine that last one when Jesus was like, hey, throw your net down. I imagine I'm like, no fish, Jesus! And then it's like, oh, snap, the boat's tipping. They called for help. Both boats were filled. This next point, God's abundance reveals our need. God's abundance reveals our need. Peter responds, go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man. How many of you guys have ever felt that before? Lord, I'm not worthy. I'm a sinful man. This morning I was watching a podcast and it's this guy, his last name's Huff, and he debates like non-Christians. He went on the Joe Rogan podcast, he's going on all these podcasts, he's a Christian guy who's just telling people about Jesus. And I love it because there was 5 people around the table and then him. And they're drilling him with questions. Well, Buddhist says this, Hinduism says this, well, your God says this, how can your God be so? And he's like, hold up. Like, this is Jesus we're talking about. And they're like, oh, all religions point to the same thing. He's like, hold up, no. Because if you die and I die, we go different places. Because Scripture tells us only one place. And I love this because he's talking, and he's like, and he says this quote in there, and I love it. He says, listen, Christian man, I deserve hell because the wages of sin is death. And I love that because so often in our lives we're like, we deserve it. We deserve hell. But because what Jesus did on the cross, He reveals our need. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. Jesus, in His beautiful creation, reveals our need. He reveals what we have in us and what He wants to call out of us. He reveals our childlike faith that just provides this beautiful picture of, hey, I'm going to give you what I have. I'm going to give you what I have, and I'm going to give you it because that's what I choose. Jesus laid down His life for us because He chose to lay down His life for us. See, God's blessing didn't just reveal His generosity, but it reveals our need for grace. God's blessing doesn't just reveal how generous and loving He is, but it shows us how we need grace. I don't know about you, but oftentimes in my life I sit back and I go, man, God, I need your grace in this area. When I fail, when I fall short, when I get mad at my kids, when I get mad at my wife, when I get mad at the driver in front of me who's going slow and I'm trying to run home to pick something up that I forgot for church on Sunday morning and I have to make it back in time. Yeah, sometimes grace isn't the first thing that comes to mind. It's, get out of my way. I didn't do that though. I just flew around them. And then that person's like, what? Sometimes grace is what we need. What this reveals to us is that Peter's humility is the foundation of his calling. Peter says, get away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man. Peter realizes who he is, and he realizes who Jesus is, and he says, I'm not worthy. Maybe you felt that. Jesus, I'm not worthy of this. Jesus, I'm not worthy of being forgiven. Jesus, you know what I've done. How can you forgive me? I'm not worthy. Truth is, none of us are. But the reality is this, is that Jesus says, because of what I did, because I love you, in your weakness, I will show my strength. A truth here is that God's power reveals our weakness, and that's where transformation begins. See, all about Christianity and all about this book is about living a life that's transformed. I don't know about you, but when I think of transformed, my mind goes to Transformers. I don't know why. It's because I'm a millennial, and that's a movie I grew up on, I guess. But this mindset of something that is so different, a car that gets shifted into this like Autobot, and you're like, how did that happen? It's like, it's pretty cool. But I look at that and I say, okay, my life, I want to be so vastly different from what I was in my sin and in my shame to where people look at me and they're like, how? And I just go, dude, I know, right? Jesus. I have friends from high school that I see online still on Facebook and Instagram and all those worldly things that I shouldn't be on as a pastor. I'm kidding. And I see their lives and I'm like, man, you went to Young Life, you went to youth group, you went to church, you were sold out for Jesus, and now you're posting things that are so backwards. What happened? What I've begun to realize is that people may have said a prayer, but they've never experienced the life transformation that happens. They've never experienced Jesus. They experienced a prayer. See, a transformed life is about changing everything. It's about changing everything. It's not just saying the circumstance I'm in right now. It's about our whole lives. And that brings us to point number 4. Jesus doesn't just want your boat. He wants your life. He ends this communication with Peter here, and he says, from now on, you'll be a fisher of men, or you'll fish for people. He says, from now on, you're no longer a fisherman, but you're a fisherman. You're going to go out and find people who need to come to me. Jesus shifts Peter's identity from a fisherman to a fisher of men. Now you're like, yes, that's the same thing. It's different. And I love this. In my notes, I have this. The catch wasn't the point. The calling was. Jesus could care less about the fish. That was not the point of the story. The point of the story is the calling of Peter. The calling that Jesus is saying, come out into the deep and watch what we can do. Come out into this transformed life and watch me grow you. Come out of your sinful grave, your sin, your shame. Walk with me and watch how we can make something new. The calling of Peter and the calling of the sons of Zebedee is the same calling that Jesus offers us today. Come, follow me, and watch what we'll do. This church is all about going out and finding people who need to know Christ. Finding people who are far from Christ. Finding people who, can I be honest with you, have walked away from the church because of the Christian people. We all have experienced church hurt in some regard. We've all experienced shame. We've all experienced the things of this world. And yet, Jesus says that doesn't matter. Come, let me be the restorer. Come, let me help you understand that I am so much greater than the church because I want to make you into my church. See, Re-Church is all about being shifted, molded, being remade, reborn, renewed, revived, rejuvenated, whatever you can think of. We want people to experience Jesus in a new way, to bring refreshment, renewal to who Jesus is. And that's part of why these Serve Sundays are coming back. Part of why we're going to focus back in on what our DNA is, and that's serving people as Jesus served the church, as Jesus loved the church. Because our calling is to be that fisher of men, to get out of the boat, to throw away the nets, to throw away the fish. Now, I've said it before, and so Peter here, that was a pretty lucrative business. That was a business in this context that they could make a lot of money. Your whole life, the sons of Zebedee, the fact that the sons of Zebedee left everything, James and John, they had everything set up for them. They had everything set up for them. They had other people working with them. Dad was this like big guy who owned a lot of stuff. He was very rich and wealthy, and they're like, there's something about this Jesus guy. And I imagine the dad going, multi-million-dollar Fortune 500 company, or sleeping in tents at night, hoping to find food. And the son's like, there's something over here. There's something over here that I want. Okay, go. See, in our lives today, oftentimes I wonder, are we willing to leave behind something so we can follow Jesus fully? Are we willing to leave everything behind and say, Jesus, I'm in. It doesn't make sense, but I'm in. And I wonder, what do we need to leave behind today? See, Jesus is calling us to launch into deeper water, to trust Him beyond what makes sense. You don't need more ability, you just need more availability. You don't need more ability in your life. Oh, if only I was able to do this. No, Jesus says, give me your availability, give me your time, give me your life, give me what you have, and watch what I'll do. Imagine if Simon Peter said, oh, Jesus, if I had a better net, then I'll catch more fish. No, Jesus said, cast down the net you have, the holes, the repairs, everything you've made in it, the nasty, the dirty, the stinky. Cast down that net because I just want your availability. I don't need your ability, I want your availability. Because I can make you more than able. If we are willing to give Jesus our availability, our time, He can do something crazy. Like Peter, we are called not just to witness a miracle, but to follow the miracle worker. We're not called just to sit there and say, okay, cool, Jesus, awesome. You healed this person, or Jesus, you did what I asked in my prayer. We're called to say, Jesus, you did that. I'm going to follow you even if you didn't do it. Even when our prayers don't make sense, even when our prayers, dare I say, don't get answered, we're still called to follow the miracle worker. We're still called to follow Jesus when nothing else makes sense. We're still called to follow Him in the midst of our storms of life. So to wrap this all up in a pretty little bow, are you willing to leave everything behind to launch into the deep waters? Are you willing to give Jesus your availability to let Him transform you and do something great? And are you willing to follow Him even when it doesn't make sense? To follow the miracle worker when your prayers may be no? That is what this story in Luke chapter 5 is all about. Living out your calling, not being afraid, and loving Jesus for who He is.